A rain-soaked teenager stumbles into a biker bar, mascara streaming down her face, begging for help. The room falls silent. Most turn away, but one grizzled veteran rises from his stool and asks the question that changes everything. Who hurt you? What happens next will restore your faith in unexpected heroes. The Iron Den had seen better decades. Neon beer signs flickered against wood-paneled walls scarred by cigarette burns and carved initials from riders long gone. Outside, October rain hammered the asphalt in sheets, turning the parking lot into a mirror of brake lights and chrome. Inside, the jukebox played low, Johnny Cash drawling about redemption, while a dozen bikers hunched over their drinks, content in the Friday night ritual they'd perfected over years. Frank Morrison sat in his corner booth, the same spot he'd claimed every weekend since 2008. At 68, his hands were road maps of scars and engine grease that never quite washed out. The leather vest draped over his shoulders carried patches from 3 decades of riding. Iron Brotherhood MC, Vietnam veteran, and a small purple heart tucked near his collar that he never talked about. He sipped black coffee, hadn't touched alcohol since '96, and watched the rain through the window with the 1,000-yard stare of someone who'd learned to notice everything. Bulldog, a mountain of a man with a gray beard down to his chest, was winning at pool. Wrench, thin and wiry, tinkered with someone's phone at the bar. Joe, the bartender and owner, polished glasses with methodical precision. It was routine, safe, predictable. Then the door exploded inward. The girl nearly fell through the entrance, catching herself on the doorframe. Water poured off her like she'd been swimming fully clothed. Her blonde hair hung in dark ropes across her face. The dress, once probably pretty, maybe for a school dance, clung torn and muddy to her frame. No shoes, feet bleeding. She couldn't have been more than 16. The music didn't stop, but every conversation did. She stood there gasping, scanning faces with eyes so wide they looked animal. Her left cheek carried a bruise turning purple. Mascara streaked down in black rivers. Her hands shook violently as she gripped the doorframe like it was the only thing keeping her upright. "Please," she choked out, voice raw. "Please, someone, I need help." The room crystallized into uncomfortable silence. A few bikers looked down at their drinks. One muttered something to his buddy and turned his back. Joe set down his glass with a sharp clink, his face skeptical rather than sympathetic. He'd seen too many setups, too many people looking for money or running Khan's girl. "You can't just—" Joe started, moving around the bar, but Frank was already standing. His chair scraped against the floor with a sound that cut through everything. The room seemed to part without anyone actually moving, a shift in energy as the old veteran stepped forward. His boots hit the floor with purpose. 50 years of reading people, of surviving ambushes and recognizing when someone was in real danger, had honed his instincts to a razor's edge. He'd seen that look before, 20 years ago, on his daughter Emily's face when she'd finally worked up the courage to tell him about her husband. 3 months before Frank buried her. He stopped 3 feet from the girl, close enough that she could hear him over the rain, far enough that she wouldn't feel cornered. His voice came out rougher than he intended, worn down by decades of cigarettes and desert dust, but impossibly gentle. "Who hurt you?" For words, that's all it took. The girl's face crumpled. Her knees gave out. Frank lunged forward, catching her before she hit the ground, and she collapsed into him, her whole body convulsing with sobs that sounded like they'd been held back for years. She smelled like rain and fear and something chemical he couldn't place. "I got you," Frank murmured, holding her steady. "You're safe now. I got you." Behind him, he heard the scrape of chairs. His brothers were standing now, the skepticism replaced with something harder. The code was simple. You protect those who can't protect themselves. No exceptions. No debate. The girl pulled back just enough to look up at him, tears mixing with rain. "They'll send me back," she whispered. "Please don't let them send me back." Frank's jaw tightened. He'd heard those words before too. "What's your name?" "Maya. Maya Reeves." "Okay, Maya." He shrugged off his leather jacket and wrapped it around her shoulders. It swallowed her whole. Nobody's sending you anywhere until you tell us what happened. You understand? You're safe here." She nodded, clutching the jacket like armor. Frank looked over his shoulder. Bulldog was already moving toward the door, positioning himself like a sentry. Wrench had his phone out, not calling anyone yet, just ready. Joe's expression had shifted from suspicion to grim understanding. He was a father too. "Joe, get some towels and water." "Wrench, first aid kit." Frank guided Maya toward his booth, lowering her gently onto the cracked vinyl. "Take your time. Start wherever you can." Maya's voice came out in fragments, broken sentences that Frank had to piece together like shrapnel. "The foster home on Berkeley Road. 6 girls. Mr. Garrett who locked doors at night and told them nobody would believe troubled kids with records. The inspections that weren't inspections. The way he smiled while he did it. With every word, Frank's hands curled tighter. The room had gone completely still. Even the jukebox seemed to sense the weight of what was being said and had gone quiet between songs. When Maya finally fell silent, exhausted, Frank looked around at his brothers. They all wore the same expression, the one that came before action, before justice, before the kind of reckoning that didn't wait for slow bureaucracy. "We ride," Frank said quietly. Nobody argued. The rain hadn't let up. If anything, it had gotten meaner, turning the roads into slick black ribbons that reflected the streetlights in fractured patterns. Frank's Harley rumbled beneath him, the engine's growl swallowed by thunder. Maya sat in the sidecar he'd attached years ago for long trips with Linda, now wrapped in 2 jackets, a wool blanket, and a tarp that kept most of the weather off her. Behind them, 5 more bikes formed a tight V formation. Headlights cut through the downpour like angry eyes. Bulldog rode closest, his massive frame hunched against the wind. Wrench had a waterproof pack strapped to his back, equipment he'd grabbed from his van without explanation. The others, Crow and Tommy, were younger members who'd proven themselves loyal. Nobody spoke. The engines said everything. Frank had made one call before they left, to Linda. 22 years of marriage meant she could read a situation in 3 sentences. "Bring her home when you're done," she'd said, and he heard her moving through the house already, pulling out the spare bedroom sheets. That was Linda. No questions about strangers, just action. But they weren't going home yet. Berkeley Road sat in the kind of neighborhood that used to be decent before the factories closed. Houses with sagging porches and chain-link fences. Cars on blocks. The foster home stood out only because someone had tried. Fresh paint on the shutters, a neat lawn, cheerful yellow porch light, a mask that made Frank's stomach turn. They killed the engines 2 blocks away and coasted to a stop beneath a broken streetlight. The sudden silence felt heavy. Frank checked on Maya. Her eyes were closed, but he knew she wasn't sleeping. Her jaw was clenched too tight. "You're staying with Crow," Frank said quietly. "He'll keep watch here." "I want to help," Maya whispered. "You are helping by trusting us." Frank squeezed her shoulder. "This is what we do." Crow, barely 25 with tattoos crawling up his neck, nodded and positioned his bike at an angle that gave him clear sightlines in both directions. His hand rested on something under his jacket. Frank didn't ask what. The rest of them moved on foot, shadows merging with shadows. Wrench led them through a yard overgrown with weeds, past a dog that started barking until Bulldog made some low sound that shut it up instantly. They positioned themselves across from the house, tucked behind an abandoned panel van that smelled like rust and old paint. Wrench unpacked his gear with practiced efficiency. Compact camera with a telephoto lens. Directional microphone. A tablet that glowed faint blue in the darkness. Frank had learned not to ask where Wrench got his skills. Some things from the service you carried forward, questions unspoken. 2-story, Wrench muttered, scanning windows. Lights on 2nd floor. 3 rooms. Ground floor looks like common areas and office. "How many kids?" Bulldog asked. "Maya said 6, Frank replied. "All girls. Ages 13 to 17. Tommy spat into the mud. "And nobody noticed?" "People notice what they want to notice," Frank said grimly. He'd seen it overseas, Entire villages turning blind eyes to horrors because acknowledging meant acting, and acting meant risk. Easier to pretend everything was fine. A light flickered on in a second-floor window. Through the rain-streaked glass, Frank could make out a shadow moving. Wrench adjusted the camera, the lens whirring softly. The shutter clicked in rapid succession, nearly silent. Then the front door opened. A man stepped out, late 40s, soft around the middle, wearing khakis and a polo shirt that screamed, trustworthy professional. He held an umbrella and moved toward a Buick in the driveway with the casual ease of someone who had nothing to hide. That's Garrett. Maya's voice came from behind them. Frank spun. She'd left Crow and crept up on them, water-soaked again, defiant. Before he could protest, she pointed. That's him. That's the one who… Her voice broke. Bulldog shifted to block her view, but Frank held up a hand. She has a right to see this. Garrett got in his car and pulled away, taillights disappearing around the corner. But they kept watching. Wrench kept recording. 20 minutes passed, then 40. Frank's knees ached from crouching, his bad leg cramping, but he didn't move. Just before midnight, another car arrived. This one was a sedan, dark blue, official-looking even without markings. The driver got out, and Frank's blood went cold. The man wore slacks and a button-down, but clipped to his belt was a badge holder. He moved toward the house like he belonged there, checking his phone once before knocking. Not at the front door, but at a side entrance partially hidden by shrubs. The door opened immediately. Someone had been waiting. Got him, Wrench whispered, camera whirring. License plate, face, badge number on the zoom. This guy's law enforcement or CPS? CPS, Maya breathed. Mr. Holt. He does the home visits. He tells us we're lucky to have Mr. Garrett. The pieces clicked together in Frank's mind like a rifle being loaded. This wasn't just one predator. It was a pipeline. Someone in the system feeding vulnerable kids to a monster, then making sure nobody asked questions. The rage that filled him was cold and familiar. The same ice-water focus that had kept him alive in firefights decades ago. Emotion was dangerous. Purpose was survival. They watched for 3 more hours. Past midnight, then deeper into the dead hours of morning. Holt finally emerged, looking relaxed, satisfied. A man with no conscience to trouble his sleep. Lights went out one by one, windows going black like closing eyes. By the time the last light died, leaving only the yellow porch glow, the house looked peaceful, innocent, hiding its poison behind fresh paint and a manicured lawn. Wrench packed his equipment. I've got everything. Timestamps, faces, plates. This goes up the chain right, we bury them. Not local PD, Frank said. Someone you trust at state level. I know someone, Bulldog offered. My cousin Sarah, state investigator. Straight arrow. Frank nodded. They moved back to the bikes, exhaustion settling into his bones. Maya walked between him and Bulldog, steady now, anger replacing fear. As they rode back toward the iron den, Frank thought about codes. The ones written in law books, and the ones written in blood and brotherhood. Sometimes justice needed a courtroom. Sometimes it needed proof and patience. But always, it needed someone willing to stand up first and ask the right question. Dawn broke gray and cold. Maya slept in Joe's back office, curled on the old couch under every blanket they could find. Her breathing had finally evened out around 5 a.m., after the nightmares stopped making her cry out. Frank sat in a chair by the door, his rifle across his lap. Not because he expected trouble, but because some instincts never died. Linda arrived at 6:30 with thermoses of coffee and a duffel bag of clothes. She took one look at the sleeping girl and her eyes went hard in that way that meant someone was going to pay. She kissed Frank's forehead and whispered, "Good," before settling into the chair he vacated. The others gathered in the main bar area. Wrench had his laptop open, USB drives scattered across the table like evidence in a trial that hadn't happened yet. The footage played on loop, Garrett leaving, Holt arriving, timestamps burning in the corner. 23 minutes of damning proof. Bulldog, your cousin's still trustworthy? Frank asked. Sarah Chen. 15 years with State Criminal Investigation. She doesn't play politics. Bulldog pulled out his phone. But I call her. This gets real official real fast. That's the point. Frank leaned over the table, studying the frozen frame of Holt's badge. We've got one shot at this. If we spook them or tip the wrong people, evidence disappears. Girls get moved. Holt buries the whole thing under paperwork. Tommy, who'd been quiet since they got back, spoke up. We could handle it ourselves. Garrett wouldn't be hard to find. The room went still. Frank understood the sentiment. He'd felt it burning in his chest all night. But he'd seen what happened when men took justice into their own hands without thinking past the immediate satisfaction. Bodies piled up. Good people went to prison. And the system that enabled monsters kept grinding on. No, Frank said firmly. We do this right. Those girls need more than revenge. They need safe homes, therapy, a future. That doesn't happen if we're sitting in cells. Bulldog nodded and dialed. The call lasted 8 minutes. When he hung up, his expression was grim. She's coming. Says if this is what I think it is, she's bringing FBI. Wrench looked up sharply. FBI means this goes federal. Good, Frank said. Means Holt can't make it disappear. Detective Sarah Chun arrived at 7:45 in an unmarked sedan. Alone. She was mid-40s, compact and efficient, with eyes that cataloged everything in 3 seconds. She'd brought her own coffee. Bulldog embraced her briefly, then stepped back to let her work. She didn't waste time with pleasantries. Wrench handed over the USB drive, and she plugged it into her laptop, watching in silence. Her jaw tightened when Holt appeared on screen. When it finished, she played it again, taking notes. Dennis Holt, she said finally. CPS Regional Supervisor. 15 years in the system. Spotless record. She looked at Frank. Until now. Where's the girl? Sleeping. She's been through hell. I'll need her statement. But not yet. Sarah closed the laptop. This is bigger than one foster home. If Holt's involved, he's been placing kids strategically. We need to pull records on every home he's supervised for the past 3 years, cross-reference complaints that got buried, find the pattern. How long? Frank asked. To build an airtight case? Weeks. To get those girls out of that house today. She checked her watch. 4 hours. I'm calling in a child welfare team and FBI field agents. We'll execute simultaneous warrants. Garrett's home, Holt's office, CPS records. They won't have time to coordinate. Bulldog grinned. That's my cousin. Sarah stood. But I need something from you. All of you. When this breaks, media will swarm. Questions will fly about how this came to light. The official story is that the girl escaped and came directly to police. You were never there. You never watched that house. Understand? Frank met her gaze. We don't need credit. We need those kids safe. Then we're clear. She pocketed the drive. Stay available for background statements, but keep Maya close. She's going to need people she trusts when this explodes. She left like a storm rolling out, purposeful and contained. The bikers sat in silence for a moment, processing how quickly violence could transform into procedure, how rage could be channeled into something that might actually stick. At 9:15, Maya emerged from the office, Linda's arm around her shoulders. She looked smaller in borrowed clothes, jeans rolled at the ankles, a sweater that hung loose. Her eyes found Frank immediately. What happens now? Now we wait, Frank said gently. But not for long. By this afternoon, people who can actually help will be tearing that place apart. You'll never have to go back. What about the others? Jenna and Alexis and... They're getting out too. All of them. Maya's lower lip trembled. What if they don't believe us? What if Holt? He can't touch this. Frank pulled out a chair for her. You were brave enough to run, to ask for help. That was the hardest part. Everything else, we've got people handling it now. Linda set down eggs and toast that nobody had seen her make. Eat, sweetheart. You're going to need your strength. At 12:07, Frank's phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. Rolling now. 6 units. FBI on scene. It's done. He showed Maya the screen. She read it twice, then pressed her face into her hands and sobbed. Not from fear this time, but from something that looked almost like relief colliding with years of buried hope. Across town, in a house with yellow shutters and a neat lawn, doors were being kicked in. Girls were being wrapped in blankets and led to safety. A supervisor with a spotless record was being read his rights. And a predator who'd hidden behind kindness was learning that some questions, once asked, couldn't be ignored. Frank watched Maya cry herself empty in Linda's arms and thought about his daughter, about second chances, about how sometimes the right thing to do was simply to stand up and refuse to look away. Justice was slow, but it was coming. 3 weeks felt like 3 years and 3 days all at once. Maya sat at Frank and Linda's kitchen table on Thanksgiving morning, watching Linda teach her how to make pie crust. Flour dusted the counter like fresh snow. The house smelled like turkey and rosemary, like something Maya had only seen in commercials. Through the window, she could see Bulldog in the driveway, showing his teenage daughter Chris how to adjust a carburetor on Maya's bike. A rebuilt '82 Yamaha they'd surprised her with last week. Not too much water, Linda said gently, guiding Maya's hands. Just enough that it holds together. Maya's hands still shook sometimes, but less than before. Dr. Reeves, her therapist, who she saw twice a week, said that was normal. That healing wasn't linear. That some days she'd feel strong and others she'd feel like that girl stumbling into the iron den, and both were okay. The adoption paperwork sat in Frank's study, half completed. Social services had fast-tracked it given the circumstances, but there were still hoops. Background checks, home visits. Maya didn't care about the bureaucracy. She cared that Linda had cleared out the spare room and let her paint it blue. That Frank had hung her drawings on the fridge without asking if they were any good. That nobody locked doors at night. The doorbell rang, then rang again. Then someone just walked in because that's what you did at Frank's house on Thanksgiving. The living room filled with voices. Wrench arrived with his wife and 2 boys. Tommy brought his girlfriend and enough beer to stock a bar. Crow showed up with a pecan pie from his grandmother. Within 20 minutes, the small house bulged with leather vests, loud laughter, and the kind of chaos that felt safe. Bulldog's daughter Chris cornered Maya by the coat rack. She was 17, with purple streaks in her dark hair and an eyebrow piercing that her dad pretended to hate. "So, you're officially one of us now," Chris said, grinning. "That means you have to come to the rally in April. Non-negotiable. I don't even know how to ride yet. Yet, that's the important word." Chris bumped her shoulder. "Besides, you can ride with Frank. He's got that sidecar that makes him look like a vintage war hero." Maya laughed, genuinely laughed, and it felt strange and good, like exercising a muscle she'd forgotten she had. At dinner, 18 people crammed around a table built for 8. Folding chairs from the garage. Mismatched plates. Frank carved the turkey with the precision of someone who'd field-dressed deer, and Linda orchestrated the chaos like a conductor with a wooden spoon. Before they ate, Frank stood. The room quieted. He wasn't a speech guy, Maya had learned that. He fixed bikes and poured coffee and said more with silence than most people did with words. So when he cleared his throat, everyone listened. "Not much for tradition," he started, gripping the back of his chair. "But this year's different. This year we've got someone new at the table who reminds us why we do what we do. Why we look out for each other. Why brotherhood isn't just about the road. It's about being there when someone needs you to be." His eyes found Maya's. "You walked into that bar and asked for help. That took guts most people don't have. And you're still here, still fighting, still showing up every day. That's the hardest ride there is." Maya's throat tightened. "So here's what I'm thankful for. Second chances. For people who don't give up. And for family, the one you're born into and the one you build." He raised his glass. To Maya. "Welcome home, kid." "Welcome home," the room echoed, glasses clinking. Maya couldn't speak. She nodded, blinking hard, and felt Linda squeeze her hand under the table. After dinner, while others watched football and argued about carburetors, Maya found Frank in the garage. He was bent over the Yamaha's engine, his reading glasses perched on his nose, grease already on his hands. "Need help?" she asked. "Always." He handed her a wrench, thinking we should adjust the timing before the rally. "You'll want her running smooth." They worked in comfortable silence for a while, the only sounds metal on metal and the distant hum of conversation from inside. Maya had learned this was how Frank communicated, through shared work, through teaching her to rebuild things. "Frank," she set down the wrench. "That first night, when you asked who hurt me, why did you ask that instead of, I don't know, anything else?" He was quiet for a long moment, wiping his hands on a rag. "Had a daughter once. Emily. She married young guy who seemed decent. Took me too long to see the signs. By the time she told me the truth, she'd already convinced herself nobody would believe her. That she deserved it." Maya's chest ached. "What happened?" "I lost her. And I promised myself if I ever saw that look again, that fear mixed with hope that someone might actually help, I wouldn't ask the wrong questions. Wouldn't waste time doubting. Would just be there." "You saved me," Maya whispered. Frank looked at her, his eyes tired but warm. "No, kid. You saved yourself. You ran. You asked for help. All I did was listen. Everything after that, that's on you. Your courage. Your choice to keep going." Maya picked up a socket wrench, turning it over in her hands. "Dr. Reeves says I get to choose what my story means. That I'm not what happened to me. She's right. So I'm choosing this." Maya gestured at the garage, the bike, the house full of noise behind them. "I'm choosing family. The real kind." Frank smiled, rare and genuine. "Then we're choosing you right back." Later, as the sun set orange through the garage door, Maya wore her vest for the first time. Bulldog had presented it during dessert. Black leather, Morrison, stitched across the back in white thread. Underneath, smaller but just as permanent, "Daughter." She stood in front of the mirror in her new room, tracing the letters. Behind her reflection, she could see the drawings on her wall, the books on her shelf, the door that stayed unlocked. She could hear Linda laughing at something Wrench said, could smell pie and coffee and home. 3 weeks ago, she'd stumbled into a bar with nothing but fear and torn clothes. Tonight, she had a name that meant something, a family that chose her, and a future that looked like it might actually be worth living. She went back downstairs to join them, and nobody asked if she was okay. They just made room at the table, handed her pie, and kept talking like she'd always been there. Because now she had been. Sometimes the heroes we need aren't the ones we expect. They're the ones who simply ask the right question at the right time. What would you have done in Frank's place? Share your thoughts below. If this story moved you, hit that like button, subscribe to embrace the journey, and share this reminder that courage comes in many forms. Thanks for riding with us. See you in the next video.